What's up everybody, you're watching Tech Dingus, and this is my follow-up review of the iPhone SE 2020. There are many great things about this phone, and also naturally there are a few drawbacks, and I'm going to talk about them. One thing that really stands out, having been using an iOS product after a few years hiatus, as I switched to Android back in 2017, is how efficient and streamlined the Apple ecosystem really is. The phone pairs perfectly with my MacBook Pro and my AirPods Pro, and things like the Message app or AirDrop or AirPlay really have me wondering why I switched over in the first place. Oh yeah, I remember, it's because they took away the headphone jack. But one complaint I've always had about Android offerings, and yes, this complaint spans many different phones I've experienced, is the fact that they're buggy, they freeze, they reboot themselves. On a whim, they'll decide that Wi-Fi isn't an option anymore, or that the screen needs to be stuck in landscape orientation for some reason. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate the specs you can get for the money in the Android world, and there are certainly many choices of hardware and things that you can customize, but it's been great using a phone that doesn't make me angry. The iPhone SE is quick, snappy, bugless, and non-infuriating for the most part, and I appreciate that it works the way it's supposed to. The A13 Bionic chip is fast, and if you're into playing games on your phone, it performs very well, although it does get a little bit hot when you really tax the processor. The touch response of the screen is fantastic, and I still firmly believe that when it comes to touchscreens and trackpads, Apple just cannot be beat. I think the user interface experience of this phone is right on par with the flagship models, and even though there may be lots of reasons to go Android, no other manufacturers seem to be able to replicate the feel and response of an iPhone. The camera in this phone is pretty darn good. Being able to do 240p slow-mo and HD is awesome, and having a cinematic 4K 24 frames per second option is very useful. I took a motorcycle ride up to the mountains for a bit of hiking with the phone strapped to my chest like a GoPro, and the results are pretty great looking. One thing to note is that the stabilization is pretty heavy and works well when you're using it handheld and trying to get a steady shot, but as you can see in the footage on the bike, it can get pretty jittery if not used properly. I'd say the worst part about the camera is the fact that Apple programmed in a ton of sharpening that you can't turn off. You're stuck with it no matter what, and it can definitely look pretty silly at times. When you watch back the footage on an iPhone, it actually looks great, but throw it into your editing software and watch it on a computer monitor, and you're gonna start getting pretty upset about it. Other than that, it's definitely on par with cameras in much more expensive devices, and at the price point, I'd say it's one of the more compelling reasons to make the purchase. Speaking of watching video on the screen, I'm pleasantly surprised at the quality of the screen. You'd think having a lower resolution and pixel density than its direct competitors would be more noticeable, but I honestly never thought to myself, I wish this screen had a higher resolution. The colors are spot on, it's bright enough to watch in daylight, the True Tone feature keeps the white balance perfect, and it really does contribute to a great experience. The only gripe I have is the size. Once you've gotten used to a large device, even if there's a notch or a cutout hole for the camera, it's very noticeable that you're watching a tiny screen, and I was pretty happy to go back to my Galaxy S10 for that reason. If you're looking to upgrade to an iPhone from something like a Galaxy Note 7, I wouldn't recommend downsizing. This phone is clearly marketed towards the minimalist user who wants a phone that can fit easily into pockets and is relatively non-invasive, and you definitely get that with this device. The build quality is really good. I didn't use a case at all other than gaff taping the back of it when I went for a motorcycle ride just in case. And I'm not seeing any micro scratches on the glass or anything like that. I know that after a couple months of heavy use they're gonna inevitably appear, but so far it doesn't seem like this phone's gonna look like it lost a battle to some sandpaper anytime soon. Unless of course you keep sandpaper in your pocket, which I don't recommend. Battery life isn't super good, I'm just gonna come out and say it. It's not horrible. I don't think most users are gonna have a hard time keeping it charged, but if you watch a ton of video on your phone like I do, it drains pretty quickly. I went as long as I could between charges, and I even let the phone sit for a couple days to see how long it would hold a charge while turned on, and here are the results. If you use it heavily, it may get through one day, but I had to set it down on the wireless quick charger by the evening a couple times. If you use it moderately, just listening to music, checking messages, and taking a video here and there, it's gonna last you about a day and a half, maybe two. Leaving it on untouched drained the battery in about 4 days. And taking video, an hour-long 4K video will kill it. I had to plug it into a power brick while I was hiking because the time lapse on the way up the mountain took about 60% of the battery life. And it actually stopped recording and died right when I got back down from the canyon, as I had it recording continuously on the way back down. The Wi-Fi and cellular antenna in the phone are pretty strong. I was able to keep it on my house Wi-Fi up to about a block away, whereas my Galaxy S10 loses connection right when I get out of the driveway. I did lose service in the canyon, but it seemed to be right at the point where I usually do. I drive that canyon quite a bit, so I know exactly when the service cuts off, and it seemed like it performed just like any other phone would. The Bluetooth range seems to be pretty good, although that totally depends on the device that you're connected to as well, but I will say I can walk entirely around my house with AirPods connected to the phone sitting in my office without dropping any signal. So now the big question, would I buy this phone? Well, I did, because people don't just give someone with a channel the size of mine a phone to review, but I am going to be selling it off to a friend of mine, as I personally am not a fan of a phone this size. Is it worth it for $400? Yes, absolutely. The Pixel 3a is a great phone and a tough competitor, but in the end, it really comes down to this. Do you want to argue about specs, or do you want to get into an ecosystem where feel and functionality is the primary concern? And this is the reason why I'm actually considering switching back to Apple. I may possibly be buying the iPhone 11 Pro or whatever the flagship iPhone 12 is when it comes out, because I got another taste of all the things that I've been missing since I moved away from the platform in 2017. Even after all this time, I'm still holding onto my stupid headphone jack. But now after using this phone, I'm starting to ponder how silly that is. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you found it informative, please scroll down and just start hitting buttons. Subscribe to my channel, make fun of me in the comments, whatever you want, as long as it makes you happy, because you should be happy. See you next time.